Picture a room you were never invited into. It is upstairs in a college in Oxford, and it is cold the way old stone is always cold, and there is a fire going that doesn't quite reach the corners. It is a Thursday night, sometime in the late 1940s, a meeting of the group these men call the Inklings. The blackout of the war is over, but the rationing isn't, and the men in this room have the slightly worn look of people who have lived through 2 wars and expect, on some level, to survive a third. There are pipes, there is bad sherry or beer carried up from the pub, or tea gone cold, and there is a man reciting aloud. The man reading is heavy-set, balding, with a voice that fills a room the way a cello fills a room, warm, certain, made for being listened to. His name is C.S. Lewis, though his friends call him Jack, and he is reading from a manuscript that is not finished and may not be any good. A children's story, of all things, about 4 children who climb into a wardrobe and find a snowbound wood on the other side, and a lamppost burning all alone in the snow, and a creature with the legs of a goat and an armful of parcels who is so startled to see a human child that he drops them. It is one of the most famous openings in the English language. You have probably walked through that wardrobe yourself. Most of the world will fall in love with it. And across the room, half in shadow, there is another man who hates it. He is smaller, neater, quicker, a fidgeter, a pipe tamper, a man who speaks too fast and swallows the ends of his sentences. He is the greatest world builder who has ever lived, though almost no one knows that yet, because the enormous thing he has spent his whole life making is still mostly inside his own head and a mountain of paper he can't bring himself to finish. His name is J.R.R. Tolkien, and as his dearest friend in all the world, recites aloud this little story about the fawn and the snow and the lamppost, Tolkien sits there and something in him curdles. He doesn't like it. He really, genuinely, deep in the marrow, doesn't like it. Now, stop and feel how strange that is, because this is not a stranger. This is not some critic, some rival, some envious nobody. This is the man who, more than any other human being alive, made Tolkien possible. Without the man reading by the fire, there is no Lord of the Rings. None of it exists. Tolkien said so himself, plainly, in writing, that without this friend's encouragement, he would never have finished it, never have offered it to the world, that the great work of his life would have stayed a private hoard of unfinished languages and partly drawn maps. The wardrobe and the ring came out of the same room, the same fire, and the same friendship. And Tolkien hated Narnia, not mildly, and not with the polite distaste of a colleague. He hated it in a way that lasted, that he grumbled about for years, that some people think helped crack the deepest friendship of his life right down the middle. So here is the question this whole story is going to chase. For the next 2 hours, down into the roots of 2 of the most beloved imaginary worlds ever made. We are going to ask why the man who gave us Middle-earth despised the world next door, and what he saw in that snowy wood that the rest of us, walking through the wardrobe as children, never saw. And here is the part nobody tells you, the part that makes this worth your evening. He was right. On his own terms, by his own standards, Tolkien's case against Narnia is not snobbery and it is not jealousy. It is coherent and it is serious, and once you understand it, you can never quite unsee it. He was right, and he was also completely, profoundly wrong. Wrong in a way that he could not see, because the very thing that made him the greatest builder of worlds was the thing that blinded him to what his friend had actually done. This is the story of the most important disagreement in the history of fantasy. It is a story about 2 kinds of magic, 2 ideas about God, 2 men who loved each other and couldn't say so, and 1 little book about a wardrobe that one of them couldn't forgive. And before we go any further, you should know that right now, as this story is being told, both of these worlds are being remade for the screen. Greta Gerwig is rebuilding Narnia, and she is starting, Of all the places she could have started, with The Magician's Nephew, The Creation Story, the book where the singing lion calls a world up out of the dark. New Middle-earth films are coming too. The argument these two men could never resolve is about to be fought all over again, in front of the entire world, by makers who may not even know whose argument they are continuing. By the end of tonight, you will. Let's go back to the beginning. Let's go back to before either of them had built anything at all. In the spring of 1926, in a faculty meeting of the English school at Oxford, which is exactly as dull as it sounds, two men are introduced who do not, at first, think much of each other. Tolkien is 34. He has been to the war. He carries Beowulf around inside him like a second heartbeat. He is, in fact, one of the foremost Beowulf scholars in England, a man for whom the old poem is not an academic exercise, but a living thing, and he has a private project, this absurd, secret, enormous thing, a whole mythology with its own invented languages that he has been building since before the trenches, that he tells almost no one about, because how could you possibly explain it? He is sharp and a little prickly, and he believes, passionately, professionally, that the old stories of the North, the dragons and the doomed kings, and the cold courage of men who fight knowing they will lose, are not childish at all, but are the deepest serious things a person can give their life to. Lewis is 27. He is brilliant, combative, hungry for argument, the kind of man who will take any position just to feel the muscle of his own mind working against yours. He is also, at this point, an atheist, a hard, clear-eyed, almost cheerful atheist who finds the whole idea of God an embarrassing piece of wishful thinking. He has come out of the same war Tolkien came out of, the same mud, the same friends who didn't come back, and he, too, secretly, helplessly, loves the old northern stories, the gods of Asgard, the twilight of the world, that particular ache he could never name as a boy, the thing he called joy with a capital J, the sudden stab of longing for somewhere you've never been. Here is the thing about Lewis that you have to understand all of it. He had spent his whole life feeling that longing, the northernness, the music of myth, the catch in the throat at the sound of certain words, and he had built a wall in his mind between that feeling, which he treasured, and the truth, which he believed was bleak and godless and grey. He kept myth on one side and fact on the other, with the beautiful lies he loved separated from the ugly truth he accepted, like two rooms with no door between them. And then he met a man who would knock that wall down. Because here is what happened, and it happened slowly, over pipes and beer and long walks and longer arguments, the way the most important things in a life almost always happen, too slowly to notice while they're happening. Tolkien and Lewis discovered that they were, in the deepest place, the same. Not the same in temperament, they could not have been more different, the neat, anxious Catholic and the booming, combative skeptic, but the same in the thing that mattered. They both heard the same music. They had both been ambushed, as boys, by the same impossible longing. They had found, in each other, the only other person who took the thing seriously. Lewis would later call Tolkien his second friend, and he meant something very specific by it, and very generous. The first friend, he said, is the one who is your double, who sees everything as you see it, your alter ego. But the second friend is the one who shares your interests but approaches them all at the wrong angle. He is the man who is everything you are but pointed the other way, so that every time you meet you strike sparks. You are forever hammering at each other's arguments, and you never agree, and you cannot do without him. That was what they were to each other. They struck sparks for more than 30 years. They formed a circle. You've heard of it, the Inklings, a loose, smoky, argumentative brotherhood of friends who met on Thursday evenings in Lewis's rooms at Magdalen College and on Tuesday mornings in the back room of a pub called the Eagle and Child, which everyone called the Bird and Baby. There were others. Lewis's brother Warnie, a quiet, retired soldier with a gift for French history. Hugo Dyson, loud and funny and impatient. Later, others still. But the engine of the thing, the two great suns it orbited, were always Jack and Tollers. That's what they called each other. Jack and Tollers. And on Thursday nights, these grown men, these professors, sat in the firelight and recited their work aloud. This is the part that should make the hair on your arms stand up, if you love these books. Because what got recited aloud in that room, chapter by chapter, draft by draft, as the pipes burned down, was The Hobbit. And then, for years and years, painfully, slowly, was The Lord of the Rings, Frodo's flight from the Shire, the Council of Elrond, the fall of Gandalf in the dark of Moria. The first ears to ever hear those words were the ears of the men in that room, and the man who paid the closest attention, who pushed hardest, who would not let Tolkien stop, was Lewis. You have to sit with that. The single most important reader in the history of Middle-earth was C.S. Lewis. Tolkien was a perfectionist of the most paralyzing kind, a man who could spend a decade on the etymology of a name, who revised and doubted and abandoned, who had a genuine gift for never, ever finishing anything. The Lord of the Rings took him 12 years to write, and there were long stretches where it simply stopped, where the great machine of it seized up and he put it in a drawer and turned to other things, and it might have stayed in that drawer forever. And every time, it was Lewis who pulled it back out. Lewis who asked what happened next. Lewis who told him, again and again, in that warm, certain cello of a voice, that it was good, that it was more than good, that he had to finish it, that the world needed it. When the book was finally done and published and began its slow march toward becoming one of the best-loved stories ever told, Tolkien wrote, and I want you to hold on to this, because everything that comes after has to be weighed against it, that the debt was not in doubt, that but for the encouragement of Lewis, he did not think he would ever have completed it or offered it to anyone at all. Take that in. Without this friendship, the thing you love does not exist. The maps, the songs, the long defeat and the sudden grace of it, gone, never written, never finished, lost in a drawer in North Oxford with 1,000 pages of Elvish grammar. That is the size of what these two men were to each other. So when I tell you that Tolkien hated Narnia, when I tell you that he sat in that firelit room and listened to his dearest friend recite aloud the opening of what would become one of the most beloved children's books in the history of the world, and felt something near disgust, I need you to feel the full weight of it. This was not a feud between rivals. This was an injury inside a love. This was the dearest friend Tolkien ever had, doing a thing that Tolkien could not stand, and Tolkien being unable, for all his love, to pretend otherwise. To understand why, we have to understand what these two men believed about stories, about myth, about magic and lies, and the truth. And to understand that, we have to go for a walk. A specific walk, on a specific night, that I would argue is the single most important conversation in the entire history of fantasy literature, because it is the night that one of these men became a Christian, and it is the night, though neither of them could have known it, that planted the seed of everything that would one day drive them apart. Before we go any further into how these two men disagreed, I have to tell you about the thing they shared that was deeper than any disagreement, deeper even than the books. Because both of these men built other worlds for the same terrible reason. Both of them were trying to survive something. And until you know what they had both walked out of, you cannot understand why escaping into an imagined country was, for either of them, not a childish hobby, but a matter of spiritual life and death. They were both soldiers. They both went to the First World War. And they both came home from it having watched the people they loved most in the world die in the mud before they were 30. Tolkien went up to the Somme in the summer of 1916 into the single worst slaughter the British Army had ever known. into the place where, on the first morning alone, 20,000 men died. He was a signals officer. He lived in the trenches, in the lice and the corpse smell, and the constant nearness of being unmade, until trench fever finally took him out of the line and probably saved his life. But the thing the war did to Tolkien was not only the horror of the front, it was who it took. Tolkien had a brotherhood. 4 boys, from school, they had called themselves, with the grand silly seriousness of clever teenagers, the TCBS, a little secret society of friends who believed, genuinely believed, that the 4 of them together might do something beautiful for the world, might change it, might leave it better and brighter than they found it. They were everything to him. They were his first audience, his first believers, the first people who ever made him feel that the strange things growing inside him might matter. And the war took them. By the time it was over, 2 of the 4 were dead. One of them killed on that first catastrophic day at the Somme, the other dying of his wounds months later. A boy who had written to Tolkien, near the end, telling him that if he, the writer, survived, he must say the things the 4 of them had dreamed of saying, for all of them, because the others would not get the chance. Tolkien carried that for the rest of his life. He survived, and they did not. And the whole towering achievement of Middle-earth is, in some real sense, the promise of a dead boy being kept by the one who lived. When you feel that enormous grief running underneath all of Tolkien's work, the long defeat, the beautiful things passing and not coming again, the unbearable weight of being the one who has to go on, that is not a literary mood. That is the Somme. That is 2 friends in the mud. That is a man building a world vast and consistent and eternal enough to hold a grief that the real world had no room for. And Lewis. Lewis went too. He was wounded at Arras in the spring of 1918. And here is the bitter irony of it. He was hit by a British shell, one of his own sides, falling short. He lay on that battlefield believing he was dying, and the experience marked him in ways he spent decades sorting out, and he eventually wrote about it with extraordinary honesty in his memoir, Surprised by Joy. But the deepest injury, for Lewis as for Tolkien, was not the shrapnel. It was a friend. Lewis had made a pact with a fellow soldier, a young man named Paddy Moore, that if either of them died, the survivor would look after the other's family. Paddy was killed, and Lewis kept the promise for the rest of that woman's life, with a faithfulness that cost him and that he never fully explained to anyone. He came home from the same war, having made the same kind of promise to the same kind of ghost, carrying the same impossible debt of the survivor. 2 young men, 2 wars that were the same war, 2 brotherhoods broken in the mud, 2 boys who came home when their best friends didn't, and who spent the rest of their lives, in some way, writing for the dead. Now, here is why this matters, for everything we have been saying about magic and allegory and the lamppost. There is a sneer, you have heard it, maybe you have even made it, that says fantasy is escapism, that imagining other worlds is a childish flight from reality, a refusal to grow up and face the real world. And Tolkien, who had faced more reality by the age of 24 than most of his critics would face in their whole soft lives, had nothing but contempt for that sneer. He answered it directly in his great essay on fairy stories, and his answer is one of the bravest things ever written about why stories matter. Of course, fantasy is escape, he said, but think about who sneers at escape. Jailers condemn a man for wanting to get out. It is jailers who hate the word escape. If a man is locked in a prison, we do not call him a coward or a child for thinking about the world outside the walls, for dreaming of the sea and the green fields and home. We do not confuse the escape of the prisoner with the desertion of the soldier. A prisoner who longs for freedom is not refusing reality. He is refusing to let the prison be the whole of reality. He is remembering that there is a world beyond the wire, and that the wire is not the truth, and that he was made for the green fields and not for the cell. That, Tolkien said, is what fantasy is. Not a flight from the real, but a flight to it, back toward the deep, true things that the grim, grey, mechanized modern world, the world of the trenches and the factories and the shells, had buried and made us forget. Recovery, he called it, the gift of seeing the world clean again, the way you saw it as a child, before familiarity dulled it. Escape, the prisoner's holy refusal to mistake the cell for the cosmos. And consolation, the deepest gift of all, the sudden turn toward joy at the end of the dark, the eucatastrophe, the eagles, the thing your heart insists on hoping for, even when every fact says hope is foolish, because, Tolkien believed, your heart is right and the facts are not the whole story. Both of these men had been in the cell, the real one, the mud and the wire and the dead friends, and both of them spent their lives building doors out of it. Tolkien his cathedral, Lewis his cottage in the snow, not to escape the truth, but to get back to it, to remember the green fields, to keep a promise to the dead, to insist, against everything they had seen, that the darkness was not the final word. So when Tolkien stood in the snowy wood of Narnia and objected to the lamppost, understand what was underneath his fussiness about consistency. He was not a pedant quibbling over rules. He was a man who believed, with the whole weight of the Somme behind him, that building a true door out of the prison was the most serious work a human being could do, and who could not bear to see the door built carelessly. And when Lewis raced to finish the wardrobe and throw it open to every child he could reach, understand what was underneath his hurry. He was a man who knew, with the whole weight of Arras behind him, that the door has to be reachable, that there is no point in the most beautiful escape ever engineered if the prisoner cannot find it in time. They were not really arguing about a children's book. They were two survivors of the same horror, arguing about the right way to build the way out, and they were both, God help them, right, because there is more than one kind of prisoner, and more than one kind of door. It is the 19th of September, 1931. A Saturday night going into Sunday morning. 3 men are walking the grounds of Magdalen College after dinner, along a path beside the river that the college has had for centuries, a path called Addison's Walk. It is late. There has been a lot of wine, and there is, by the accounts we have, a gust rising in the trees. The 3 men are Tolkien, Lewis, and a friend of theirs named Hugo Dyson, and they are arguing, Lewis arguing, mostly, because Lewis always argues, about myth. About why, if these old stories are just stories, just beautiful lies that primitive people told themselves, they should have such terrible power over the heart. Why a grown man, a hard-headed scholar who knows perfectly well that there are no gods, should feel his throat tighten at the death of Balder, at the fall of Asgard, at the doom of the gods in the cold. Why the lies move us more than the facts. Lewis, at this point, is nearly a believer in God. Tolkien and others had worn down his atheism over years of these very arguments, but he is stuck. He has accepted that there is probably a God. What he cannot accept, what he keeps stumbling over, is Christ, the specific story, the dying God who rises again. He finds it, he says, beautiful, but no more true than the other beautiful stories. He can feel the pull of it exactly the way he feels the pull of the Norse myth of the dying Balder, or the corn gods of the old religions who die in autumn and rise in spring. It was lovely and moving, but he remained quite sure it was false, merely a myth, a lie breathed through silver, he calls it, beautiful and not true. And on that dark path, with the gusting air in the trees, Tolkien turns the whole thing inside out. He says, and I am paraphrasing because the exact words are lost to the gusting air, but the shape of the argument we know well. He says, you are right that the dying and rising God is a myth. You are right that it appears again and again, in culture after culture, the God who dies and comes back, the sacrifice that brings new life. You feel its power because it is one of the deepest, truest patterns the human heart has ever produced. But here is what you have wrong. You think that because it is a myth, it cannot be a fact. You have built a wall between the two, and that wall is the mistake of your whole life. Because Tolkien says that one of these myths may have come true, exactly once, in a particular province of a particular empire, on a particular hill, the story that humanity had been dreaming and half remembering and telling around fires for 10,000 years, the dying god, the sacrifice, the impossible return, actually happened. It happened not as a lie breathed through silver, but as a fact and as history, the true myth, the one that all the others were rumors of, shadows of, longings toward. The myths of the dying gods, Tolkien is saying, are not competitors to the gospel. They are prophecies of it. They are the human heart, made by God, dreaming in the dark of the thing that God would one day do in the daylight. And the reason they move you, Jack, the reason Baldur's death makes you weep, is not that you are being fooled. It is that you are catching the scent of the real thing on the gusting air, before it arrives. And the wall came down. Lewis would write about it afterward, in letters, almost dazed by it. Within days he had crossed the line he had been standing at for years. He became a Christian. He would spend the rest of his life as the most famous Christian writer in the English language. With Mere Christianity, The Problem of Pain, the Screwtape Letters, and book after book, making the faith legible to ordinary people who had never heard it explained that way. And he never stopped saying who had pushed him over the edge. It was Tolkien, on that path, in that moving air, who gave him the idea that broke the wall, that the thing he loved, the myth, the music, the longing, was not opposed to the truth, but was the truth's own messenger, that joy was not a lie, that the door between the two rooms had been there all along, and it was Christ. Now, I told you this was the most important conversation in the history of fantasy, and I told you it planted the seed of everything that would one day drive these two men apart. Here is what I meant. Tolkien gave Lewis a key. The key was the idea that myth can carry truth, that story is not the enemy of the real, but its smuggler, sneaking past what Lewis would later call the watchful dragons, the part of us that armors up the moment it is told to feel something holy. Tolkien handed Lewis that key on Addison's Walk in the Dark, and then Lewis took the key and he used it to build Narnia. He took the idea, myth can carry truth, and he ran with it straight past the place where Tolkien wanted it to stop. Because for Tolkien, the truth in a story had to be buried so deep, woven so completely into the world, that you could move through the whole thing and never once feel a lesson being pressed into your hands. The truth had to be in the bones of the thing, not on its lips. And Lewis, warm, urgent, evangelical Lewis, who had been handed the saving idea of his life and could not bear not to give it away, Lewis took the same key and made a story where the truth walks onto the page on 4 feet, with a mane, and lays down its life on a stone table, and tells you, more or less to your face, exactly what it means. It was the same key, but they opened opposite doors. The conversation that saved Lewis's soul is the same conversation that produced the books Tolkien couldn't stand. Tolkien taught Lewis that myth tells the truth, and then spent the rest of his life appalled at the kind of truth-telling myth Lewis decided to write. You see, already, that this was never going to be a simple quarrel. It goes too deep. It goes all the way down to what each of them thought a story was for. So let's go down there. Let's look carefully at the 2 theories of myth that these men carried, because once you understand the fault line between them, every single thing Tolkien hated about Narnia falls into place like tumblers in a lock. In 1939, a few years after that walk, Tolkien gave a lecture, that is, if you care about any of this, one of the most important things he ever wrote. It is called On Fairy Stories, And it is not really about fairy stories at all. It is Tolkien's confession of faith about what imagination is for. It is the closest thing we have to a map of the inside of his head. And if you want to understand why he hated Narnia, you have to understand 3 ideas from it. The first idea he called subcreation. Tolkien believed that when a human being makes a world, a real, whole, imagined world, with its own history and languages and laws, that person is doing something nearly holy. We are made, he believed, in the image of a maker. And so when we build a secondary world that the mind can walk around inside and believe, we are not playing, we are not lying, we are exercising the one divine thing in us. We are little makers, sub-creators, reflecting in miniature the act of the great maker who made us. To build a world was, for Tolkien, an act of worship. It was the most serious thing a person could do. And because it was that serious, it carried an obligation, a terrible, exacting obligation. The world you build has to be true to itself. Every law you lay down, you must keep. Every consequence must follow. The inner consistency of the imagined world is sacred, because the moment you break it, the moment you let something into your world that the world itself would never create, something that belongs to a different reality entirely, the spell breaks. The reader, who had been standing inside your world believing it, is thrown out. The enchantment fails, and the failure is not a small craft error. For Tolkien, it is almost a sin. It is the sub-creator betraying his own creation. This is why Tolkien spent decades on the things you never even notice. Why the moon is in the right phase on the right night across 1,000 pages. Why the languages have grammars and the grammars have histories. Why there are family trees going back generations for characters who appear for half a chapter. It was not obsession, or not only obsession, it was reverence. The world had to hold together perfectly, because a world that holds together perfectly is the only kind that tells the truth. Middle-earth feels ancient and real and load-bearing because every single beam of it was set with this fanatical, prayerful care. You believe in it because Tolkien believed in it, all the way down to the Silmarillion, the vast foundational mythology he spent his entire life writing and never finished. The deep history of the world beneath the world, the ages before Frodo and Bilbo, the stories of the First Age and the Second, the whole impossible backstory that most readers never study, but that holds Middle-earth up the way bedrock holds a cathedral. The second idea is the one that matters most for our story. Tolkien drew a hard line between two things that look alike from the outside, but are, to him, opposites. He called them allegory and applicability. Allegory is when a story is a code. When the lion stands for Christ, and the witch stands for sin, and the whole tale is a kind of costume that a sermon is wearing, so that to understand the story correctly is to translate it, to take off the costume and find the lesson underneath. In a true allegory, the author is in control of the meaning. The author has decided what each thing means, and your job, as the reader, is to decode it correctly. Tolkien used the word domination. He said allegory has the purposed domination of the author. The writer is standing behind the curtain, pulling the strings, and the meaning runs in one direction only, from the author's lesson down into your obedient head. And Tolkien hated it. Cordially, he said. He cordially disliked allegory in all its manifestations, and he had reasons that went down to the bone. Part of it was the war. Tolkien had been at the Somme. He had watched nearly all of his dearest friends die in the mud before he was 26, and he had a horror, ever after, of anyone who told him that his suffering meant some tidy thing, that the war was an allegory of this, a symbol of that. No, the mud was the mud. The dead were the dead. Real things are not symbols of other things. Real things are themselves, monstrous and holy and irreducible. and to allegorize them is to disrespect them, to flatten the unbearable particular weight of a real thing into a neat little lesson you can carry in your pocket. When people insisted that The Lord of the Rings must really be about the atomic bomb or about the world wars, Tolkien practically spat. "It is not about anything," he kept saying. "It is. The ring is the ring. Frodo is Frodo. The story does not stand for something realer than itself. The story is the real thing." Tolkien wanted applicability instead. The story told straight, true to itself, meaning nothing but itself, and then released into the reader, to land where it lands. Applicability, he said, lives in the freedom of the reader. You follow Frodo's long defeat, his slow ruin under the weight of the ring, and it speaks to your own life, to your own burden, your own slow ruin, whatever it is, not because Tolkien encoded your life into Frodo, but because Frodo is so completely, truthfully himself that he becomes a mirror in which 1,000 different readers each see a different true thing. The meaning is not dictated, it is discovered. It runs the other way, up, out of the story, into each particular heart, carrying a different gift to each one. That difference is the whole ballgame. Allegory is the author commanding the reader. Applicability is the author setting the reader free. One is a closed fist, the other is an open hand. And here is the third idea, the one that holds the whole thing together, the most beautiful word Tolkien ever coined, eucatastrophe, the good catastrophe. The sudden, unlooked-for turn at the very end of the darkness, when all hope is gone and the eagles come, when the thing you were sure was lost is given back, not because the story cheated, but because grace is real, and sometimes, against all the evidence, it breaks in. Tolkien believed that the highest function of the fairy story was to give us, for one piercing moment, the feeling of that turn, the catch in the throat, the weeping that is not sorrow. And he believed, this is the deepest thing in all of it, that the reason that turn moves us so unbearably is that it is true, that the resurrection is the great eucatastrophe of human history, the good catastrophe at the end of the world's long dark, and that every smaller eucatastrophe in every smaller story is a rumor of it, a foretaste, a little bell rung in the dark to remind us that the real one is coming. So now you have the whole shape of Tolkien's faith about stories, a world built with prayerful, fanatical consistency, so true to itself that you believe it, meaning that is never dictated but always discovered, the open hand and not the closed fist. And underneath it all, a buried, secret, load-bearing hope, the resurrection itself, woven so deep into the bones of the thing that you feel it without ever once being told it is there. That was Tolkien's cathedral. He spent his life building one. Every stone set by hand, every joint true, the whole structure pointing silently, wordlessly, toward heaven, so that a person could walk in as an atheist, never hear a single sermon, never be told a single thing to believe, and walk out having felt, in the marrow, the shape of grace. Now hold that picture in your mind, the cathedral, silent, perfect, pointing without a word, and walk with me through a wardrobe into a snowy wood, where a faun is carrying parcels under a lamppost that has no business being there, and Father Christmas is about to arrive with swords for children, and a lion is going to die on a stone table and tell you, more or less to your face, exactly what it means. And ask yourself how the man who built the cathedral could possibly have felt standing in that wood. Here is the heart of the charge. Here is the thing Tolkien could not forgive. In The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, a great lion named Aslan, the true king of the country, the son of the emperor beyond the sea, gives himself up to be killed in the place of a traitor child. He is bound, he is mocked, he is shaved of his mane and shamed before a jeering crowd. He is laid on a great stone table and a knife goes into him, and then, at dawn, When the grief is deepest, the table cracks, and he is alive again, more alive than before, because there is a deeper magic that the powers of death did not know, that when a willing victim who has done no wrong is killed in a traitor's place, death itself starts working backwards. You do not need a degree in theology to know what you are reading. No child has ever needed it explained. The dying king, the willing sacrifice, the substitution for the guilty, the mocking crowd, the cold dawn, the empty place where the body was, the impossible return. It is the most famous story in the Western world. Wearing the thinnest possible coat of fur, Lewis is not hiding it. Lewis does not want to hide it. Lewis wants you to feel the whole weight of the gospel come down on you while you are 8 years old and think you are reading about a lion. And for Tolkien, this was the betrayal of everything. Because remember the cathedral. Remember the buried hope, the secret woven so deep you feel it without being told. Remember that the entire dignity of subcreation, for Tolkien, rested on the truth being in the bones of the world and never on its lips. The whole point, the holy point, was that you did not say it. You built it so true that the saying became unnecessary. To take the deepest mystery in the universe, the death and resurrection of God, and put it on the page in a costume so thin that the meaning shows straight through, that, to Tolkien, was not reverence. It was the opposite of reverence. It was allegory in its purest and most damning form. It was the closed fist. It was the author standing behind the curtain, pointing at the lion, saying, "You are supposed to understand who he really is." It was the purposed domination of the author, laid right on top of the holiest thing there is. To Tolkien, Lewis had taken the true myth, the very idea Tolkien had given him in the gusting air on Addison's Walk, and he had stripped it of its mystery and handed it to children as a decoded message. He had taken the thing that was supposed to be felt in the dark, wordlessly, like the turn of a eucatastrophe, and he had turned the lights on and explained it. He had made the sermon visible, and worse, far worse, he had done it carelessly, quickly, in a world slapped together out of whatever was lying around, which we will get to, because that is its own injury. But the first injury, the deep one, was this. Lewis had committed allegory, open, unashamed, four-footed allegory, and he had done it with the one story Tolkien held most sacred of all. Now, if we stopped here, you would have a tidy little tale, the purist and the populist, the careful man scandalized by the careless one, and you would have half the truth and the worse half, and I would be doing exactly the thing I promised I would not do, which is let Tolkien win the argument just because his cathedral is so beautiful. Because Lewis had an answer, and the answer is better than you think. Lewis said, flatly, more than once, to readers who wrote to him asking what Aslan was an allegory of, that Narnia was not an allegory at all. He insisted on it. And he made a distinction that I want you to hold very carefully, because it is the hinge on which Tolkien's entire case may swing. Allegory, Lewis said, is when you take something real, say despair or pride, or the Christian virtue of hope, and you invent an imaginary person to represent it. The character does not exist in his own right. He is a walking abstraction wearing a name. That is what allegory is. And Aslan, Lewis said, is not that. Aslan does not stand for Christ. Aslan is not a symbol of Christ, a code for Christ, a personification of Christ. Aslan is Christ. That is what Lewis claimed he was doing, and he had a word for it. He called it supposal. Suppose, he said, suppose there were another world, a world like Narnia, full of talking beasts and ancient magic. And suppose that world, like ours, needed saving. And suppose that the Son of God, the same one, the real one, chose to enter that world and save it, not as a man, because it is not a world of men, but in the form that world would need, as a great lion, the king of the beasts. That question becomes the heart of the story. what he would do, and how he would die and rise. That, Lewis said, is not allegory. That is not a code to be decoded. It is a thought experiment about the real Christ in an imagined world. The lion is not a symbol pointing at something realer than himself. The lion, in the logic of the story, is the real thing, walked into a new room. Lewis was not encoding a lesson. He was, he believed, doing exactly what Tolkien praised, taking the truest of all true myths and letting it become flesh, become fur, become a particular living creature in a particular world, and then setting it loose to land in the reader where it landed. And you can feel, can't you, that this is not nothing, that Lewis is not the simple sermon smuggler Tolkien took him for. There is a real philosophical move here, and it is subtle, and it may even be right. Tolkien said, "You have written an allegory, you have dominated your reader, you have put the meaning on the lips of the thing." And Lewis could answer, "No, I have done a supposal, I have incarnated rather than encoded, and the child who weeps at the stone table is not decoding a message, she is meeting a person. She does not think, as the knife goes in, 'Ah, this represents the crucifixion.' She thinks, 'They are killing him, and he let them, and I would die before I let this happen, and oh, he's getting up.' She feels it, in the dark, wordlessly. Exactly the way you wanted, Tollers, exactly the way the cathedral was supposed to work. So we have to hold the question open, don't settle it yet. Because there is a second injury, and on this one Tolkien's case is much, much harder to answer. The first charge was about the lion, the second charge is about the lamppost, and the faun, and Father Christmas, and a problem that goes to the very foundation of what Tolkien thought a world was. Go back to the wood, the very first scene. A little girl steps out of a wardrobe into snow, and the first living thing she meets is a faun. Now stop, a faun. A faun comes from classical mythology. It is a creature of classical mythology, of Greece and Rome, of warm Mediterranean hillsides and the pipes of Pan. It appears in a snowbound northern wood that, a moment ago, was the inside of an English country house, and it is carrying parcels, wrapped in brown paper, the way you'd carry parcels home from the shops on a winter afternoon in 1940s England. And it is sheltering under a lamppost, a cast-iron Victorian street lamp, the kind you'd find on an Oxford pavement, burning all alone in the middle of a primeval forest where no street has ever run. Keep going, because it only gets worse, from Tolkien's point of view. The villain is the White Witch, who is part northern, descended, we are told, from Lilith and from giants. There are talking beavers who keep a cozy English cottage and serve a proper hot dinner with marmalade roll for pudding. There are dwarfs out of Norse legend. There is, later in the series, the wine god Bacchus and his drunken old companion Silenus, romping through the woods in a frenzy, straight out of a Greek mystery cult. There are river gods and tree spirits, naiads and dryads, lifted from the classical world. There are Father Time, and a great deal of medieval chivalry, and creatures Lewis simply made up on the spot. And presiding over the whole thing, in the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, arriving in a sleigh, with a sack, with a long white beard and a red robe, handing out presents and a word of cheer, is Father Christmas. Santa Claus, in the same wood as the faun and the lion and the beavers and the witch out of Hebrew legend. To you, reading it at 7 years old, none of this is a problem. To you, it is glorious. It is everything you love, all at once, jumbled together in one snowy wood. The Greek myths and the Norse myths and the fairy tales and Christmas morning and a talking animal having you round for tea. It is the inside of a child's head poured out onto the page. To Tolkien, it was an abomination. Because remember, subcreation. Remember that for Tolkien, the inner consistency of the imagined world was sacred. that the single unforgivable sin of the world builder was to let in something that the world itself could never have produced, something belonging to a wholly different reality, because the instant you did, the spell broke and the reader was thrown out of the world. A faun belongs to one mythology, a dwarf belongs to another, Father Christmas belongs to the actual, current day, real world of English children and their stockings on the mantle. You cannot put them in the same wood. They come from incompatible universes. They have different gods behind them, different rules, different airs to breathe. To shove them all into one story is not richness, it is incoherence. It is the world builder admitting that he has not built a world at all. He has just thrown a heap of beloved things into a sack and shaken it. There is no there. There is no Narnia, not really. There is only a stage, with the most wonderful props, and behind the painted backdrop, nothing. No bedrock, no deep history holding it up, no there, underneath, for the spell to stand on. There is an anecdote, it has been told many ways, and we should be honest that we are at the mercy of other people's memories here, that when Lewis recited the early chapters of the story aloud to the Inklings, Tolkien was not kind about it. One friend who was there, a man named Roger Lancelyn Green, remembered Tolkien grumbling about it afterward, that it simply would not do, that it was no good, this whole snow and faun and Father Christmas business. And there is a sense, in the accounts we have, that Lewis went ahead and wrote it anyway, and finished it, and published it, and that he did so over Tolkien's plain disapproval, that for once, the man who had listened so patiently to 12 years of Middle-earth did not get the deference back. Lewis wrote his little book his own way and let the world have it, and the world took it to its heart, and Tolkien stood there in the snowy wood of it shaking his head, saying, in effect, "But you can't. You can't just put Father Christmas in with the fauns. It won't do. It won't hold. It isn't a world. And here is what I have to tell you, as honestly as I can, before I turn the whole thing over." On his own terms, he was completely right. If you accept Tolkien's premises, and they are serious premises, held by serious people, and they produced the most convincing imaginary world in the history of literature, then Narnia is a mess. It is genuinely, structurally, a mess. It does not have the bedrock. The lamppost really doesn't make sense. The faun really shouldn't be there. Father Christmas really is, by every rule of subcreation, a catastrophe. A child can't see it, but a master builder can see nothing else. And Tolkien was the master builder, and he could not stop seeing it for the rest of his life. He looked at Narnia, and he saw a great, gifted, careless man taking the holiest story in the world and dropping it into a sack of mismatched toys and calling it done. He was right. Now let me tell you why being right was the biggest mistake he ever made. But not yet. First, we have to look at one more thing Tolkien held against his friend. Not the lion, not the jumble, but something even more personal, something that went to the core of how each of these men thought a person ought to work, ought to make, ought to love. We have to talk about speed. Here is a fact that I think tells you almost everything about the difference between these two men. The Chronicles of Narnia, all 7 books, the whole world from its singing into being to its rolling up at the end of time, Lewis wrote in about 7 years. Some of the individual books he drafted in a matter of weeks. The words poured out of him. He would finish one and start the next, almost before the ink was dry. By the time he was done, he had built, populated, and destroyed an entire universe, and he had done it in roughly the span of time it takes most people to get a mortgage. In that same period, give or take, Tolkien was struggling to finish the appendices to The Lord of the Rings. Not the book, but the appendices. The family trees and the calendars and the notes on pronunciation at the back. He agonized over them. He revised the histories of kings who appear nowhere in the actual story. He held up the publication of the entire work, infuriating his publisher because he could not let go of the genealogies of the dwarves and the precise reckoning of the Shire calendar. The Lord of the Rings itself had taken him 12 years, with long dead stops. And even when the story was done, he could not stop building the ground beneath it, the ground that would eventually become the Silmarillion, published only after his death, because he never stopped revising it, never decided it was finished, never let it go. Two men built two universes, one built in 7 years in a fever of generosity, one built across a lifetime in a fever of care, and each man looked at the other's method and saw something near a moral failing. To Tolkien, Lewis's speed was carelessness, and carelessness was a kind of disrespect. He could not understand how anyone could love a world and make it that fast, or bring something into being without tending every corner of it, checking that the moon was right, that the histories cohered, and that the languages held. For Tolkien, the slowness was the love. The decades of unglamorous labor on things no reader would ever notice, that was devotion. That was how you honored a secondary world, by giving it the same patient, total, unrewarded attention that a real maker gives to a real creation. A world worth building was worth building forever. To dash one off in a few weeks was, almost, to insult it. It said, "You are not worth my whole life. You are worth a season." And you can see why a man like that, watching a man like Lewis throw off a beloved masterpiece every few months, while Tolkien himself bled over a single map, might feel something complicated. Something with envy in it, maybe, though he would never have said so. Something with grief in it, the sense of a friend who had been given the same gift and was spending it so freely, so fast, so heedlessly, while Tolkien hoarded his and polished it and could barely bring himself to let any of it go. But now, turn it around, because here is what Tolkien, for all his genius, could not let himself see. Lewis was not building a world. He never meant to. That was the whole misunderstanding, sitting right at the center of everything, and it lasted them most of their lives. Tolkien thought they were doing the same thing, subcreation, the holy patient labor of making a secondary world, and that Lewis was simply doing it badly, doing it fast and sloppy and wrong. But Lewis was not doing that thing at all. Lewis did not care, in the slightest, whether Narnia cohered as a world. The lamppost and the faun and Father Christmas were not failures of world building, because Lewis was not trying to build a world. He was trying to do something else entirely, something Tolkien valued so little that he could barely recognize it as a goal. Lewis was trying to reach a child quickly, while the door was still open. He understood something about children that the cathedral builder, for all his love, did not put first. He understood that childhood is short, that there is a window, a few years maybe, when a human being can still be ambushed by joy, can still feel that stab of longing pure and undefended, before the watchful dragons grow up around the heart and armor it against wonder. He understood that you do not have decades to reach a 7-year-old. You have now. You have this winter, this reading aloud, this particular firelit hour before the child gets older and harder and learns to roll her eyes at lions. And so you do not spend 40 years getting the genealogy right. You pour everything you love into a sack, the fawns and the snow and the Christmas morning and the dying king, and you give it to her now, all of it, while she can still take it whole. Lewis's speed was not carelessness, it was urgency. It was a man who had been handed the most important idea of his life on a dark path in the gusting air, and who could not, would not, hoard it. Tolkien buried his treasure deep and guarded it for a lifetime, so that someday, perhaps, a stranger might stumble on it and be changed. Lewis ran out into the street with his arms full and pressed it into the hands of every child he could find before the light failed. Both of them were trying to give the world the same thing, the true myth, the turn in the dark, the rumor of the resurrection. One of them spent his whole life on the gift setting, like a jeweler. The other one threw the jewels into the crowd, and the crowd caught them. My God, did the crowd catch them. So the question of which man loved the work more does not have a clean answer. One could not let it go, and the other could not hold it back. I genuinely do not think there is a clean answer, and I think the fact that there isn't is the most interesting thing in this whole story. But before I make the case for Lewis, and I am going to make it hard, I owe Tolkien something. I owe him the strongest possible version of his side. Because it would be easy, sitting here, to make him the villain, the stuffy purist, the jealous perfectionist who couldn't be happy for his friend. And that is a lie. That is a cheap and lazy lie, and Tolkien deserves better, and so do you. So before we take his argument apart, let me build it all the way up. Let me show you why Tolkien was right, really right, seriously right, right in a way that should make you a little uncomfortable about how much you love Narnia. Let me make Tolkien's case, as if my life depended on it, because somebody should. Start here. Tolkien was not a snob about children's books. This is the first thing people get wrong. He wrote The Hobbit for children. He studied fairy stories all his life and defended them, in that very lecture on fairy stories, against the grown-up sneer that they were childish things to be put away. He did not look down on the wardrobe because it was a book for children. He looked down on it because of what he thought it did to its readers, children most of all. And his objection, when you follow it down, is not fussiness. It is a theory of how wonder lives and how it dies. Here is the theory. Wonder, real wonder, the kind that changes you, depends on belief. Not belief that the thing is literally true, but the deeper enchantment, the willing, total surrender in which, for as long as you are inside the story, the secondary world is real and you are walking around in it, and anything that happens to its people happens, in some real sense, to you. That state is precious and it is fragile. It is held up entirely by the consistency of the world. The moment the world contradicts itself, the moment something walks in that could not possibly belong, that comes from a different reality, that the world's own logic would never create, the spell does not weaken. It snaps. You are ejected. You are suddenly a person in a chair holding a book, aware that someone made this up, and the someone did it carelessly. And once you have been ejected, you can never quite get back in the way you were. The wood is just paper again. Now apply that to the lamppost, to the faun with his parcels, to Father Christmas arriving in the same wood as the witch out of Hebrew legend. Tolkien's claim is not just that this is untidy. His claim is that it is an injury to the very enchantment the book depends on, that every reader feels it, even the child, even if the child cannot name it. That somewhere underneath the delight, a small voice says, "Wait, that doesn't fit," and the world goes a little flat, a little stagey, a little less real, and the deep belief that makes wonder transformative never fully takes hold, because the ground keeps shifting. You can love Narnia. Millions do. But Tolkien would say you love it the way you love a wonderful toy box, not the way you love a real place, because it never quite convinced the deepest part of you that it was real, because it kept breaking its own spell. And then there is the lion. Here Tolkien's case is even harder to dismiss, because it cuts to the thing he cared about most in all the world. Tolkien believed that the holiest truths can only be given to us obliquely, sideways, in the dark, through story, precisely because if you say them straight out, the heart armors up. He had a deep, almost mystical conviction that the gospel had to sneak past the watchful dragons, that the instant a reader senses she is being preached at, she stops being moved and starts being managed, and the spell of grace breaks just like the spell of the world breaks. So when Lewis put the death and resurrection of God on the page in a coat that thin, near enough that any church-going child recognizes the whole shape of it, Tolkien's fear was not prudishness. His fear was that Lewis had ruined the very effect he was reaching for. That by making the sermon visible, he had triggered the dragons. That a knowing child, a child who has been to Sunday school, reads the stone table and thinks, "Oh, this is the Jesus part," and the holy thing curdles into a lesson, and the lesson is the death of wonder. Tolkien wanted to give children the resurrection without ever letting them catch him doing it, so that it would lodge in them undefended and bloom years later. Lewis showed them the trick, and to Tolkien, showing the trick was a kind of desecration, not because he loved God less than Lewis, but because he thought he was protecting the very thing Lewis was exposing. And there is the carelessness, the speed, which I have already defended on Lewis's behalf, but hear it from Tolkien's side now, at full strength. Tolkien believed that to make a world was to participate in the act of the maker. It was, quite literally, the most sacred thing a human being could do with the imagination. And you do not do the most sacred thing quickly. You do not dash off a reflection of divine creation in a few weeks between lectures. The care is not optional decoration on top of the holiness. The care is the holiness. A world flung together carelessly is not a small sin against craft. It is, for Tolkien, a failure of reverence toward the gift of making itself. A man handed a fragment of God's own creativity and using it the way you'd doodle on a napkin. From inside Tolkien's faith, the slapdash universe is not just aesthetically weaker, it is spiritually careless. It treats the holy thing lightly. Put it all together, and you do not have a petty man being mean about his friend's book. You have a coherent, demanding, deeply serious vision of what imagination is for, and by every standard inside that vision, Narnia falls short. The world doesn't hold. The allegory dominates. The sacred is handled too fast and shown too plainly. Tolkien looked at the wardrobe through the only eyes he had, the eyes that had built the most real, unreal place in all of literature, and through those eyes, the verdict was honest, and it was damning, and it was, on its own terms, correct. He was right. And now I am going to spend the next stretch of this telling you why he was, at the very same time, more wrong than he ever knew. Because the eyes that let him see everything wrong with Narnia were the very eyes that could not see the one thing about it that mattered most. The cathedral builder had spent so long learning to see cathedrals that he had forgotten how to see a door left open in a snowy wood, and what it means to a child to walk through it. Tolkien judged Narnia by the rules of Middle-earth, and Narnia was never playing that game. That is the whole error in one sentence, and it is the kind of error that only a genius can make, because it takes a genius to build a system so complete, so internally perfect, that you forget it is a system at all and start mistaking it for reality itself. Tolkien had spent 40 years inside the rules of subcreation. They had become, to him, not a theory of one kind of fantasy, but the law of all fantasy, the way fantasy simply is. And so when he met a book that broke every one of those rules and worked anyway, worked gloriously, worked on millions of children, worked in a way his own great book never quite would on a 7-year-old, he could not process it as a different kind of success. He could only process it as failure. The rules said it should not work, so he could not let himself feel that it did. Let me take his charges back, one at a time, and turn each one over, because under every flaw he named, there is a gift he could not see. Start with the jumble, the faun, the lamppost, Father Christmas, the dwarfs and naiads, and talking beavers all crowded into one impossible wood. Tolkien saw incoherence, a world that doesn't hold together. But here is the thing he missed, the thing a child knows in her body and a master world builder had trained himself out of knowing. That jumble is not a broken world. It is a perfect map of the inside of a child's imagination. Think about how a child's inner world actually works. It does not have one consistent mythology. It has everything at once: the Greek myths from school, and the Norse gods from a picture book, and the fairy tales from a grandmother and Father Christmas from last December, and the talking animals from every story ever heard at bedtime, all alive at the same time, all equally real, all jostling together in one bright, crowded, wonderful space, with no border control between them. That is what it is to be seven. Everything you love is true simultaneously. The lamppost burning in the snow at the edge of the wood is not a failure of consistency. It is the most truthful image in the whole book. It is the exact place where the ordinary world you know, the world of street lamps and parcels and cold afternoons, touches the world of myth and magic, with no wall between them, because in the mind of a child there is no wall. Lewis did not fail to build a coherent world. He succeeded, completely, at building an incoherent one, because the incoherent one is the true shape of childhood wonder, and that was the country he was actually mapping. Tolkien built a world that feels like a real place. Lewis built a world that feels like being a child. Those are different achievements, and the second one is not lesser, and it is the one Tolkien could not see because he had grown into the greatest grown-up world builder who ever lived. Now take the lion, the allegory. The gospel worn so thin that any child can see its shape. Tolkien feared this would trigger the watchful dragons, that a knowing child would think, "Oh, this is the Jesus part," and the wonder would curdle into a lesson. And here is the strange and beautiful fact that proves him wrong. It doesn't. It just doesn't. Ask anyone who experienced those books as a child what they felt at the stone table. They will not tell you they felt managed. They will not tell you they detected a sermon and rolled their eyes. They will tell you they sobbed. They will tell you that the shaving of the mane, the humiliation, the patient, terrible willingness of the great creature to be bound and mocked and killed for the sake of a sulky boy who did not deserve it, they will tell you it broke their hearts at 8 years old in a way that no careful, buried, oblique enchantment ever did. And then the morning, the cracked table, the romp, the two girls riding on the back of the resurrected lion through the spring morning, and grown adults, decades later, cannot talk about it without their voice going. Tolkien was sure that to show the trick was to break the spell. But Lewis understood something deeper about children than Tolkien did. For all Tolkien's love of them, a child does not experience the recognizable as the obvious. A child experiences the recognizable as the personal. When a church-going child meets Aslan and feels, somewhere underneath, that she has met this before, that she knows this story, the effect is not, "Oh, I see what he's doing." The effect is, he came here too. He's here, in the wardrobe, in the snow, in the place I escaped to. The one I love is here as well. Lewis was not exposing the gospel and ruining it. He was doing the thing he learned on Addison's Walk, and learned better than his teacher. He was letting the true myth become flesh in a new world, so that a child who could not yet bear the story straight could meet its hero sideways, fall in love with a lion, and only understand years later, with a lurch of the heart, who it was she had been loving all along. That is not the death of wonder. That is the longest, gentlest, most patient evangelism ever attempted, and it has worked on more souls than the cathedral ever will. And the speed, the carelessness, 7 worlds in the time of an appendix. I have already told you it was urgency, not negligence. But now, let me say the harder thing. Lewis's so-called carelessness reached people Tolkien's care never could and never will. There are children, too young, too restless, and too far from the kind of reader Tolkien wrote for, who would never climb the long, cold mountain of The Lord of the Rings, but who walked straight through the wardrobe at 6 years old because the door was small and the snow was right there and a fawn said hello. For millions of human beings, Narnia was the first imaginary country they ever loved. It was the book that taught them that books could be doors. It was where they first met grief and courage, and sacrifice, and the strange idea that a death could be a victory. It was, for an enormous group of people, the place they first met God, not argued into him, not preached at, but ambushed by him in the shape of a lion, the exact undefended wordless ambush Tolkien dreamed of and reserved for an audience of patient adults. Tolkien wanted to give the world the resurrection so quietly that no one caught him at it. Lewis gave it to children so warmly that they never wanted to escape it. And of the two, and I say this as someone who would die on the hill of Middle-earth, who thinks The Lord of the Rings is the greater book by almost every measure I can name, of the two, it is Lewis's lion, not Tolkien's silence, that has walked into the most hearts and stayed. Here is the deepest irony of the whole story. Tolkien gave Lewis the key. Myth can carry the truth. And then Lewis used the key to open a door that Tolkien himself could never reach. The door of early childhood, the few short years when the heart is widest open and most defenseless. The years Tolkien's masterpiece arrives too late and too heavy to enter. Lewis took his teacher's idea and carried it somewhere his teacher could not follow, and Tolkien, standing at the foot of his cathedral, watched his friend run off into the nursery with the gift, and felt only that it had been mishandled, never once seeing that it had been delivered, in its millions, to the one place his own genius had locked him out of. He was right about everything, and he was wrong about the only thing that finally mattered, and he never knew it. I have been talking about books. But underneath the books, all along, there were two men getting older, and a friendship going quietly cold, and we have to talk about that now, because it is the saddest part and the most human, and because the argument about Narnia did not happen in a vacuum. It happened between two people who were slowly, painfully, losing each other. For most of the 1930s, Tolkien and Lewis were as bonded as two men can be. They saw each other constantly. They recited everything to each other. Lewis later said that at one point Tolkien had no audience he wanted more than him, and that he, Lewis, owed more to Tolkien than to almost anyone. It was, by every account, one of the great friendships, the kind that comes once in a life, if it comes at all. And then, slowly, across the 40s and 50s, it frayed. Not in one dramatic rupture, there was no shouting, no final letter, no door slammed, and in a way, the drift and the cooling were worse. The thing that historians and biographers have argued over ever since, because there was no single cause, there were a dozen small ones, each one a hairline crack, and together they let the cold in. There was a man named Charles Williams, a strange, magnetic, slightly occult figure who came to Oxford when the war scattered the London publishers, and whom Lewis fell for. Intellectually, completely, studied everything he wrote, championed him, adored him, and Tolkien, watching his dearest friend's affection swing toward this newcomer with his odd mystical books, felt something he was honest enough, later, to half admit, a plain, human jealousy. The second friend, watching the first friendship dilute. Williams died suddenly in 1945, but the injury of having been, however briefly, displaced, did not fully heal. There was religion, which should have bound them, and instead became a thorn. Tolkien was a devout Catholic. It was the center of his life, and he had helped, more than anyone, to bring Lewis from atheism to belief. He had hoped, surely, that Lewis would come all the way home, to Rome, to the church Tolkien loved, and Lewis didn't. Lewis became a Protestant, an Anglican, an Ulsterman returning in some sense to the Protestant faith of his childhood, and to Tolkien, this was a quiet, lasting grief, a sense that he had led his friend to the threshold and watched him walk into a different house. And there was the matter of Lewis becoming famous as a Christian. Through the war, on the radio, in book after book, with mere Christianity distilling the whole faith into plain English and the screw-tape letters smuggling it in through the back door of comedy, Lewis became the most beloved explainer of the faith in the English-speaking world, the broadcaster, the apologist, the man who made Christianity make sense to ordinary people. And Tolkien, the Catholic who believed these were mysteries to be lived inside the church and not packaged for a mass audience, was uneasy about it. There is a phrase attributed to him, tart and a little cruel, about Lewis becoming a sort of theologian for everybody, an amateur popularizer of holy things. Tolkien thought the deep things should be handled with more reticence, more authority, more reverence, the same complaint, you'll notice, that he had about Narnia. Lewis kept taking the sacred and making it plain and fast and available to everyone, and Tolkien kept flinching at it, in the theology and in the children's books both, because to Tolkien it was the same error wearing two coats. There were smaller professional things. Lewis, for all his loyalty, did not always advance Tolkien's career the way Tolkien may have hoped, and in the end, it was Cambridge, not Oxford, that finally gave Lewis the professorship his own university had long withheld, and he moved away. And there was Lewis's late, astonishing marriage to Joy Davidman, an American, a divorcee, a former communist, a convert, brilliant and dying of cancer when he married her, and married partly so that she could die as his wife. Tolkien, the Catholic, for whom marriage to a divorced woman was no marriage at all, was not at the wedding, was not told much about it, and felt the distance of it keenly, one more room of Lewis's life that he was no longer inside. Add it all up and you get something that is not a quarrel, and not a betrayal, and so much sadder than either. You get two proud, aging, brilliant men who had once been the whole world to each other, drifting into politeness. They remained fond and, on some level, devoted, but they were no longer essential to each other the way they had been in the firelit 30s, when the future was unwritten and they recited everything to each other. The inklings thinned out, Williams was dead, others moved or died. The Thursday nights ended, and the two great suns the whole circle had once orbited had drifted to opposite ends of the sky, and Narnia sat right in the middle of it all. Not the cause of the cooling, I don't think any one thing was the cause, but maybe its clearest symptom, because the argument about the wardrobe was never really only about a children's book. It was about everything they had come to disagree on. It was Tolkien saying, in the only language the two of them ever fully shared, the language of story, you are doing it too fast, too plainly, too cheaply. You are giving away the holy things without enough care, in your theology, in your faith, in your books, in your life. And Lewis, going ahead and writing the wardrobe anyway, finishing it, publishing it, letting the whole world love it, was answering in the same language. And you are holding on too tightly, burying your gifts so deep that the people who need them can't reach them, while there are children, right now, who could be reached today. They were arguing about Narnia. They were arguing about how to love the world, and neither of them, I think, ever fully understood that the other one was right. I want to show you something now that I think is the most quietly devastating fact in this entire story. Because for all the arguing, for all the ways these two men thought they were opposites, there is a place where they reached, independently, each in his own private mythology, for the exact same image to describe the most sacred moment imaginable. And once you see it, you cannot believe they ever thought they were enemies. In Tolkien's mythology, the world begins not with a word and not with a bang, but with music. In the deep beginning of Tolkien's whole legendarium, before Middle-earth, before the elves, before anything, there is the one, Eru Ilúvatar, and there are the Ainur, the holy ones he has made, and Ilúvatar gives them themes of music and bids them sing. This is the Ainulindal, the music of the Ainur, and it is the first chapter of the Silmarillion, the secret foundation of everything Tolkien ever built. And they sing. They make a great music, a vast harmony rising into the timeless halls, the most beautiful thing that has ever been. And out of that music, out of song, the entire world is made. Creation, for Tolkien, is a symphony. Existence is sung into being, and even the evil in the world enters as a discord in the music. Melkor weaving his own proud, jarring theme into the harmony, and Ilúvatar answering it, taking even the discord up into a deeper, sadder, more beautiful song. The whole of Middle-earth, every mountain and sea and sorrow of it, is the frozen echo of that first singing. This is the deepest, most secret root of Tolkien's world, the thing under everything, and it is a piece of music. Now, consider how the world begins in Narnia. In The Magician's Nephew, the book Lewis wrote to tell where it all came from, the lamppost and the wardrobe and the whole snowy country, a handful of bewildered people from our world tumble out into a place that is not yet anything. It is dark, it is empty. There is nothing there at all, nothing, a void. And then, in the blackness, a voice begins to sing. A single voice at first, deep, beyond comparison the most beautiful sound any of them has ever heard. And then, the cold stars themselves come into being, singing, joining their voices to the first. And as the lion walks across the bare earth, singing, singing, the grass comes rushing up green from the soil in the wake of his song, and trees and flowers, and then the animals themselves come heaving up out of the ground, called into life and shape and breath by the music of a singing lion in the dark. Aslan sings Narnia into being. Eru and the Ainur sing Arda into being. Two men built two universes, and when each of them sat down to imagine the holiest act there is, the moment a world is spoken out of nothing by God, neither of them reached for thunder or light or a commanding word. Both of them, alone in their separate studies, reached for song, creation as music, the cosmos sung into existence by a divine voice in the dark, with even the stars joining in. Here is what that means. It means that down beneath the lamppost and the fauns, down beneath all the things Tolkien thought were careless and wrong, down at the very bedrock, at the level of how a world begins, Lewis had built on the same foundation Tolkien had, the same image, the same intuition about the nature of God and the nature of making. They had spent 30 years reading each other in firelit rooms, and whether by influence or by deep agreement, or simply because two friends who love the same things for the same reasons will reach for the same truth, they had both arrived at the singing God. The Ainulindal and the first chapter of The Magician's Nephew are, at their core, the same myth, told by the same friendship, in two different keys. Tolkien stood in the snowy wood of Narnia and saw a jumble, a mess, a sack of mismatched toys. He saw the faun where the faun shouldn't be, the lamppost where the lamppost couldn't be, Father Christmas where Father Christmas had no right to stand. He saw all the surface incoherence, because his eyes were trained to see exactly that. And he could not see, or could not let himself see, that at the floor of the whole thing, in the book that tells how Narnia was born, his friend had written a creation by music that was, in its bones, a cousin of his own most secret and sacred myth. The two worlds did not begin in different places. They began in the same place. They began in song. I think if Tolkien had ever truly looked at the creation of Narnia, not the lamppost, not the surface, but the singing in the dark and the green rushing up from the ground, he might have wept, because he would have heard, underneath his friend's hurried, careless, wonderful book, the sound of his own music. He would have recognized it. Two old friends drifted apart, arguing about everything, and underneath the argument, both of them, all along, listening to the same song. They thought they were opposites. They were not opposites. They were harmony and counterpoint. They were two voices in the one music, each sure the other was singing wrong, neither able to hear. that together they were making a chord. Now I have to come back to the thing I told you at the very beginning, the thing I asked you to hold on to through all of this, because it is time to set it on the scale against everything else. Tolkien hated Narnia. Yes, we have spent 2 hours on his hatred, and it is real. But weigh it now against this, and tell me which is heavier. There would be no Lord of the Rings without C.S. Lewis. None of it exists without that friendship. I am not exaggerating for effect. I am telling you the plainest historical fact in this whole story. The book you love, the long defeat in the Eucatastrophe, Gandalf falling and returning, Sam carrying Frodo up the mountain, the whole towering thing came within an inch, many times over many years, of never being finished at all. Because Tolkien was the kind of writer for whom finishing was almost a physical impossibility. He revised forever. He doubted everything. He would write a magnificent chapter and then decide the whole architecture beneath it was wrong and go back and rebuild the foundations, and in the rebuilding, lose his way and stop. The Lord of the Rings sat dead in the water for years at a time. By every law of Tolkien's own nature, it should have ended its life the way so much of his work did, as a glorious, unfinished fragment in a drawer, a private cathedral with no roof, known to no one. And the only reason it didn't, the single load-bearing reason the thing exists, is that one man would not let it die. Every Thursday, by the fire, Lewis asked what happened next. Every time Tolkien faltered, Lewis pushed. He praised it to Tolkien's face and behind his back. He believed in it, loudly, relentlessly, for over a decade, with a generosity that had no envy in it at all. And remember, Lewis was already the more famous man, the bestseller, the broadcaster, and here he was, spending his enormous enthusiasm not on his own work, but on dragging his slower friend's masterpiece into the light. When the book was finally published, Lewis reviewed it like a trumpet blast. He compared it to the great works. He told the world that here was something that had broken into a literary landscape and lit it up like lightning, a book that did what almost no modern book dared to do. He put his whole towering reputation behind it. He is part of the reason it found its first readers at all, and Tolkien knew it. That is the part that breaks my heart a little. Whatever cooled between them, whatever distance grew, whatever he muttered about the wardrobe and the popular theology and the Anglicanism and all the rest, Tolkien never once pretended he did not owe Lewis the great work of his life. He said it outright, in writing, that without the encouragement of his friend, he did not believe he would ever have finished The Lord of the Rings or offered it to anyone. The debt, he said, was not in doubt. Not in doubt. From a man as proud and as prickly as Tolkien, that is nearly a vow. So here is the ledger, laid out plain. On the one side, Tolkien could not stand Narnia. He thought it was careless, allegorical, a jumble, the sacred handled too fast and shown too plainly. He was right about a great deal of it. The disagreement was real, and it lasted, and it was part of the slow frost that crept over the best friendship either of them ever had. And on the other side, the man Tolkien could not forgive for writing Narnia is the same man without whom Tolkien would have given the world nothing at all. Lewis is the reason Middle-earth exists outside Tolkien's own head. The Faun and the Ring came out of the same friendship. The thing Tolkien hated and the thing Tolkien made were grown in the same soil, watered by the same 30 years of Thursday nights, and you cannot have one without the other. If you could reach back in time and stop Lewis from ever writing the wardrobe, spare Tolkien that whole grief, you would have to reach into the same friendship that finished The Lord of the Rings, and you do not know, you cannot know, whether you would still have the book you love at the end of it. They are not separable. The love and the disagreement are the same friendship, seen from two sides. I think that is what we so often get wrong about the people who matter most to us. We imagine that real love is agreement, that to be truly intimate is to see everything the same way. And these two men are the proof that it is not so. They disagreed about the deepest things, about allegory and about Rome, and about how to handle the holy, and about how fast you are allowed to love the world. They drifted. They cooled. There were rooms of each other's lives they were locked out of by the end, and it was still, for all of that, one of the great friendships of the century, because friendship of that order is not the absence of disagreement. It is disagreement that the love survives. It is two people striking sparks off each other for 30 years and being, underneath every spark, indispensable. Tolkien hated Narnia, and Tolkien loved the man who wrote it more than almost anyone alive. Both of those are true. They were always both true at the same time, and the fact that a human heart can hold both at once is not a contradiction to be explained away. It is the whole truth about what it is to love another person across a long life. But the debt and the disagreement are still not the deepest thing these two men shared. Underneath both, underneath the gift Lewis gave Tolkien and the book Tolkien could not forgive, there was a single fear that haunted both of them their whole lives. The same fear, wearing two faces, the fear of a door swinging shut. And to understand that fear, I have to tell you about a girl who stopped believing. There is an injury in Narnia that Lewis put there on purpose, and it is the darkest and most honest thing in all 7 books, and it explains, better than anything else, why he was in such a hurry. It is the story of Susan. Susan Pevensey is one of the 4 children who first walked through the wardrobe, a queen of Narnia, gentle, sensible, kind. And at the very end of the whole series, in the final book, when the others are gathered together for the last and greatest homecoming into the real Narnia, the country behind the country, where every good thing that was ever loved is restored forever, Susan is not there. And when someone asks where she is, the answer is one of the most quietly devastating lines Lewis ever wrote. Susan, they say, is no longer a friend of Narnia. She has grown out of it. She has decided, in her grown-up way, that the whole thing was just a silly game they played as children, a make-believe, an embarrassment to be left behind. She is interested now, the others say with a kind of sad bewilderment, in nothing but lipstick and nylons and invitations to parties, in being thought grown up, in seeming sophisticated, in the small social games of someone desperate to be older than she is. She has not died. She has not been punished. She is simply, of her own free choice, no longer the kind of person who can get in. She has talked herself out of the magic. She has stood at the door of wonder and pulled it shut from the inside and told herself she was being mature. People have hated Lewis for this for 70 years. Other writers have attacked him over it, accused him of punishing a girl for growing up, for becoming a woman, for liking lipstick, for the crime of leaving childhood behind. And if that were really what Lewis meant, they would be right to be angry. But it is not what he meant, and we know it is not, because Lewis said so. When a worried child wrote to him asking about Susan, Lewis answered, gently, that Susan's story was not over, that she had been left alive in our world precisely so that she still had her whole life to find her way back, that there was plenty of time for her to reach Aslan's country in the end. Susan is not damned. Susan is the one whose door is still open, because her story is still being written. Lewis did not shut her out. He left her the only one of the 4 still alive, still able to come home the long way round. And the sin, if it is a sin, is not that Susan grew up. Lewis adored growing up done well. He wrote some of the wisest things ever written about the difference between being childish and being childlike. The thing that breaks the others' hearts about Susan is not that she became a woman, it is that she traded wonder for the appearance of sophistication, that she decided the deepest, truest experiences of her whole life, the lamppost, the lion, the stone table, the morning of the resurrection, were childish things to be ashamed of, and she swapped them for the thin, anxious, status-hungry business of seeming grown up. She did not lose Narnia because she got older. She lost it because she chose to be embarrassed by the best thing that ever happened to her. She slammed her own door and called the slamming maturity. Now the urgency becomes clear. This is why Lewis wrote so fast, why he threw the jewels into the crowd, and why he could not wait and polish and bury the meaning deep, the way Tolkien wanted. Because Susan is real. Susan is not a character. Susan is what happens to almost everyone. There is a door in every child, wide open, through which wonder pours, and the world spends the next 15 years teaching that child to be ashamed of it, to roll her eyes at it, to pull the door shut and lock it, and call the locking growing up. Lewis had watched it happen 1,000 times. He had nearly let it happen to himself, in the long, grey atheist years, when he had walled off the joy he loved from the truth he believed, when he too was on his way to becoming a kind of Susan, a clever, sophisticated man who had decided that the longing was childish and the bleakness was mature. Tolkien is the one who saved him from it, on Addison's Walk, in the gusting air. Lewis knew exactly how the door closes, because his own had very nearly closed forever. So he raced. He wrote 7 worlds in 7 years and threw open the wardrobe to every child he could reach, because he was not building a monument for the patient grown-up reader of the distant future. He was trying to get to the child now, this year, this winter, before the door swings shut, to plant the lion so deep in her, so early, with so much warmth and so little defense, that even when she grows up and gets clever and starts to be embarrassed by it all, even if she becomes a Susan for a while, some part of her will always remember the morning the table cracked, and will have, buried in her, a way back. Lewis's whole hurried, careless, glorious project was an act of war against the closing of that door. And here is the thing that should stop you cold. After all our talk of how different these two men were, Tolkien grieved the very same closing door. He just grieved it on a vaster scale. The whole sorrow of Middle-earth, the deep ache under everything, is exactly this: the wonder going out of the world, the elves departing, the magic thinning, the great enchanted age ending and giving way to the grey ordinary age of men who will forget. Tolkien's entire mythology is a long, beautiful lament for a world growing up and losing its magic, for the lamp going out, for the door swinging shut, for the Susanning of an entire creation. The elves leaving the grey havens at the end of The Lord of the Rings is Susan's tragedy, written across a whole world. The wonder withdrawing, the door closing, the magic passing out of reach, and the mortals left behind on the shore, growing older, beginning to forget. They were both mourning the same loss. The closing of the door to wonder. Tolkien mourned it cosmically, as the fading of an age. Lewis mourned it personally, as the slamming of one girl's heart, and then he picked up a pen and tried to do something about it before it was too late for the next child in line. One built a monument to the lost magic, so that we would always remember it had been real. The other ran into the nursery to give the magic away before it could be lost at all. Let me try to make you feel the difference, not just understand it. Because all this talk of allegory and subcreation and consistency can stay up in the head, and the thing I most want you to carry out of this is lower down, in the chest. So forget the theory for a moment. Let's just walk through both doors, one after the other, and feel what each world does to a soul. Here is how you enter Middle-earth. You come in slowly. There is a great weight of time pressing down before you arrive, ages and ages of it, and you feel it the way you feel the age of a real mountain, not as information but as presence. The names are old. The roads were built by people who are long dead and half forgotten even by the characters walking them. Every ruin you pass had a builder and a fall and a song that was sung about it once and is now only half remembered. The sadness of the place is enormous, and it is in everything. The elves are leaving, the great days are over, the whole world is in a long, slow autumn, and even the victories are shadowed by the knowledge that something beautiful is passing out of the world forever and will not come again. To be in Middle-earth is to feel like a small living thing walking through the vast ruins of something greater than you, carrying a light that will probably go out, doing your duty anyway. It is the most grown-up feeling in all of fantasy. It is the feeling of mortality and history and the long defeat, and the strange piercing courage of going on when you know you cannot win. You do not come out of Middle-earth feeling young. You come out feeling old, and somehow comforted to be old, comforted that someone has finally told you the truth about how heavy and how holy it is to be a mortal creature in a fading world. That is Tolkien's door. It is magnificent, and it is for adults, even when children love it. It is the cathedral. You go in small, and you come out having felt the weight of the everlasting. Now here is how you enter Narnia. You are a child. You are bored, or frightened, or sent away from home in a war, or simply poking around an old house on a rainy day. And you open an ordinary wooden door, a wardrobe, a painting, a gap in a hedge, a railway station that suddenly isn't a railway station, and the ordinary world simply gives way, with no warning and no ceremony, and there is snow, and a wood, and a lamp burning, and the air is different, and you are somewhere else. There is no great weight of ages pressing down. There is shock and delight, and a fawn saying hello as if he'd been waiting. The whole thing is sudden, it is intimate. It happens to you, personally, in the middle of an ordinary afternoon, and that is the genius of it, because that is exactly how wonder actually arrives in a child's real life. Not after long preparation, not with a sense of vast history. It comes through a crack in the ordinary, on a dull day, when you least expect it, and it takes you instantly somewhere the grown-ups can't follow. To be in Narnia is to feel chosen. It is to feel that the magic is for you, that you specifically have been let in, that the secret country has been waiting all along just on the other side of the furniture in the spare room. You do not come out of Narnia feeling old. You come out feeling that the world has a back door, and that you might find it again, and that something enormous and kind is on the other side, and that it knows your name. Those are two completely different gifts. And here is the thing I need you to see, the thing that finally dissolves the whole quarrel. They cannot be given by the same book. You cannot make a child feel chosen and personally beckoned through a crack in an ordinary afternoon, while also making her feel the vast crushing weight of 10,000 years of consistent history. Those two enchantments fight each other. The very thing that makes Middle-earth feel real and ancient, the bedrock, the consistency, the long preparation, the sense that this world existed long before you arrived and does not particularly notice you, is the opposite of the thing that makes Narnia feel like a door cut just for you. Tolkien's door requires the weight. Lewis's door requires the lightness. The consistency Tolkien demanded would have crushed the intimacy Lewis was reaching for, and the suddenness Lewis needed would have shattered the deep time spell Tolkien spent his life casting. So when Tolkien looked at Narnia and saw a failure of consistency, he was looking at the load-bearing wall of Lewis's entire effect and calling it a crack. The lamp post in the wood, the impossible street lamp burning where no street ever ran, is not the world breaking down, it is the door. It is the exact image of the ordinary world bleeding through into the magic, which is the one indispensable thing a child needs in order to believe she too might fall through. Remove it, make it consistent, banish the lamppost and the fawn's parcels, and Father Christmas back to the realms they properly belong to, and you would have a tidier world and a deader one. You would have fixed the flaw and killed the gift. Tolkien was trying to renovate a cottage into a cathedral, never understanding that nobody can fall asleep dreaming in a cathedral, but a child can dream her whole life in a cottage with a lamp burning at the edge of the wood. Two doors, two gifts. And the deepest mercy in this whole story, the thing I want you to walk away holding, is that you do not have to choose. You were never being asked to choose. You can have the cathedral and the cottage. You can be the small mortal walking through the ruins, under the weight of the everlasting, and you can be the chosen child, falling sideways through the furniture into the snow. You can grow old inside Tolkien's door and stay forever 7 inside Lewis's, and the two of them, who could not reconcile in life, reconcile perfectly in you, in any reader who loves them both. The argument that cooled a friendship is settled, gently, every single time a person closes the wardrobe behind them and reaches, later in life, for the ring, or the other way round. We are the peace treaty. We always were. And now that peace is about to be tested in front of the whole world, because both doors are being rebuilt at once. Here is why this old quarrel between two dead Oxford men is not a museum piece. Here is why it matters tonight. Because right now, as I am telling you this, both of these worlds are being made again, torn down to the foundations, and rebuilt for a generation that has never turned a single page of either book, who will meet Middle-earth and Narnia not through Tolkien's prose or Lewis's, but through the largest, loudest, most expensive screens humanity has ever built. The doors are being rehung, and the whole argument we have just spent 2 hours inside is about to be fought all over again, not in a firelit room over bad sherry, but in front of the entire world, by people who may not even know they are continuing a fight that started in 1949. Narnia is coming back, and it is being entrusted to Greta Gerwig, one of the most gifted filmmakers of her generation, a maker of warm, human, unbearably observant films about childhood and growing up, and the ache of leaving things behind. And of all the 7 books she could have started with, she is starting, by every account, with The Magician's Nephew. Sit with that for a second. After everything we just said, she is not starting with the wardrobe. She is starting with the creation story. She is starting with the book where a singing lion calls a world up green out of the dark, the book that holds the Ainulindala kinship, the creation by music that is the deepest secret connection between Lewis's myth and Tolkien's own. The very chapter of Narnia that most nearly answers Tolkien's most sacred page is the one chosen to open the whole thing again. I don't know if anyone making that film knows what they are holding, but you do, now. You know exactly how much is singing under that ground. And Middle-earth is coming back too, new films rising from the same Peter Jackson landscapes and beyond, the great machine of it turning over again, the cameras returning to those mountains and shores, new faces stepping into roles that a previous generation thought were settled forever. The cathedral is being rebuilt, stone by stone, in front of an audience that wasn't alive when it was first raised. So here is the question that the next few years are going to answer, whether anyone phrases it this way or not. Both of these worlds are being handed to new makers, and every new maker faces, all over again, the exact choice that divided Jack and Tollers. Every new maker has to choose between building the cathedral and building the cottage, between reaching for the vast, consistent weight of deep history and cutting a sudden, intimate door for the child in the dark. They have to choose between burying the meaning so deep it can only be felt and letting the lion walk onto the screen to break 10 million hearts in the open. They have to choose between honoring the world with patient, total, reverent care and racing to reach the widest, youngest audience while the door of their wonder is still open. There is no settled answer. There never was. That is the whole point of this story. Tolkien's way and Lewis's way are both real, both holy, both capable of glory, and both capable of failure. And the makers rebuilding these worlds right now will get some things gloriously right and some things heartbreakingly wrong. And the arguments that follow, the arguments you will see online, the arguments you will have with your friends, the arguments about what they changed and what they kept, and whether they understood the soul of the thing, those arguments are not new. They are the same argument. They are Tolkien and Lewis, walking by the river in the gusting air, still going, still unresolved, handed down now to us. When you watch the singing lion call Narnia up out of the dark on a cinema screen, and you feel that catch in your throat, you are standing exactly where Lewis stood, defending the warmth and the speed, and the door cut for the child. And when some part of you bristles at a change, at a carelessness, at a sacred thing handled too fast or shown too plainly, and you think, but that's not right, that's not how it should be done, you are standing exactly where Tolkien stood, in the snowy wood, shaking his head, saying it won't do. Both of those instincts reside in you. They are the inheritance these two men left us, the argument that never ended, the two ways of loving a world. And the fact that you can feel both of them at once, and honor both, is the reconciliation that the two of them never quite managed in life. They are going to rebuild both doors. And we, the ones who love them, get to be what Jack and Tollers could never quite be to each other in the end, the place where the two ways meet, and hold, and make a chord instead of a quarrel. C.S. Lewis died on the 22nd of November, 1963. You will notice you have never heard that date spoken with any weight, and there is a reason. On that same afternoon, in Dallas, a young American president was shot in an open car, and the whole world's grief turned, instantly and totally, toward Texas. And so the death of the man who wrote the wardrobe, who had reached more souls toward heaven than almost any writer of his century, passed almost unnoticed, swallowed whole by a louder sorrow on the other side of the ocean. The cabbie's singing lion, the lamppost in the snow, the great warm cello of a voice that had argued half of England into wonder, gone quiet on the one day the world was looking somewhere else. He died at home, in the house he shared with his brother, in the late afternoon, and the news barely made a ripple. But in Oxford, one old man felt it like the end of the world. Tolkien outlived his friend by nearly 10 years, and in those years he grew old in the way the great old trees grow old, slowly and then all at once, losing his friends one by one, the whole circle of the Inklings, thinning into memory, the Thursday nights long over, the firelit room where Frodo and the wardrobe were both born existing, now only in his head. And not long after Lewis died, Tolkien tried to put the loss into words, in a letter to his daughter. He wrote that until then, he had been feeling the ordinary feelings of a man his age, like an old tree, he said, losing its leaves one at a time, watching the people of his youth fall away around him as the seasons turn. That was the normal grief, the expected grief, the slow attrition of a long life. But this one was different. This one, he said, felt like an axe blow near the roots. An axe blow near the roots. Think about what that image is, coming from him, from the man who made the Ents, who loved trees more than almost any writer ever has, for whom a tree was not a symbol, but a near-sacred living thing. To lose Lewis was not another leaf falling. It was the axe going in low, into the trunk, into the foundation, into the part of the tree that has to hold, or the whole thing comes down. After everything, after Narnia, after the cooling, after Charles Williams and the Anglicanism, and the popular theology, and Cambridge, and Joy Davidman, and all the rooms of each other's lives they had been locked out of by the end, after all of it, when the news came that Jack was gone, the thing Tolkien reached for was the deepest injury a tree can take. Not a leaf, the root. That is your answer. That is the real answer to the whole question we have been chasing. Tolkien did hate Narnia. Yes, truly, lastingly, for the rest of his life. He hated the lamppost and the faun and the allegory and the speed, and on his own terms he was right to, and he never took a word of it back. But he also loved the man who made it. When the moment came, when the news arrived, and there was no more time for arguments, he reached past 30 years of disagreement and named the loss an axe blow near the roots. The hatred of the book and the love of the man were never in competition. The love was always underneath. The love was the root. The argument about Narnia was only ever leaves and branches, and the gusting air moved them, and they quarreled and they cooled and they drifted, but the root was the friendship, and when it was finally cut, the whole of Tolkien shook. He was right about Narnia, and he was wrong about Narnia, and in the end, none of that is the point. The point is that two men who could not agree about the most important things in the world loved each other for a lifetime anyway, and gave us, between them, out of the very same friendship, the two greatest doors in all of fantasy, and we get to walk through both. So tonight, when you go to bed, I want you to keep one picture in your mind. Not the cooling, not the quarrel, not the axe. Keep the lamppost, the cast-iron street lamp burning all alone in the middle of a snowbound wood, where no street ever ran and no light has any business shining, the impossible light that Tolkien said could not belong there, that broke every rule of the world he had given his life to. It is still burning. It has been burning for 70 years, in the imagination of everyone who ever pushed through the coats and felt the snow. It is the door that should not exist, lit by a man who loved the world too much to wait, standing at the edge of a wood that should not hold together, in a book the greatest world builder who ever lived could not approve of and could not stop his own heart from being shaped by. The lamppost is wrong, and Tolkien was right about that, and it is still the most beautiful light in all of fantasy, and it has guided more children home than any cathedral ever built. They were both right, they were both wrong, and they loved each other to the roots. And the light is still on. Thank you for walking through both doors with me tonight. The wood is quiet now, and the snow is coming down, and somewhere out past the trees the lamp is burning, the way it always has, the way it always will, waiting for whoever needs it next to come stumbling through the coats and into the cold and the wonder, the way you once did, the way the children always do. Good night.